Sakhile, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Renatus. Thank you for having me.
How have you been?
I've been great. I've been all right. Nothing to complain about, luckily. How about you?
I'm good. I'm good. Enjoying what's going on, enjoying doing podcasting and having conversations with amazing people like yourself.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Really, really excited to be here.
You're welcome. You have gone to Rochester post ALA, and one of the articles that you have written, because you've written a number of articles, is trying to explore the experiences that foreign students have when they're at the institutions that they go to study abroad, and also their experience post the institution. And it seems like it's quite an interesting read, and it's quite an interesting experience that individuals or foreign students have, or international students rather, when they go to study to international institutions. And how has yours been?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. I think so. When I was in Rochester, I was part of the editorial team for this newspaper called the Campus Times. And so I was the opinions editor. So I was, in charge of the opinion section of the magazine. I mean the newspaper, not just eliciting opinions from students that are relevant to the university community, as well as writing them myself. And so one of the articles I wrote called "How to Interact with Africans" was really just a response that I felt I need to have to the experiences that I was having as an international student in America. I felt like there was just a lot of very, very much ignorance, but also just like oblivion and lack of knowledge about Africans. And so like people used to be so surprised at us, at the fact that at like the smallest things, like people used to be surprised that we speak English, and you get all these questions like, oh, like how do you know how to speak English so well? And then you're like, yeah, like education kind of thing. And you just like, so there was just a great deal of ignorance. I would get a lot of comments about growing up in Africa. And one person asked me, have you ever been in a roller coaster? Do you know about cars? And so it's that deep kind of, And so I was just like, you know what, let me just write. And satire is just one of the ways that I love to write in. So I just wrote like this satirical piece about growing up and not just growing up in Africa, but like the kinds of things you hear from people. And yeah, I think it was pretty well received across the community.
And it's so unfortunate, despite the fact that people have access to information and they can be really ignorant when it comes to Africa.
Yeah, I mean that's the surprise, right? You get there and you realize how closed in people are and how really they don't get to learn about anything else about like except for themselves. And so I've always known about African stereotypes before going to the US, but I didn't know how bad it was until I got there, and I was like, oh, like it's kind of like the do you have zebras as pets kind of bad, you know? It's
That's
just like,
no, that's really, really bad.
yeah, agreed,
Terrible. And
agreed.
the fact that you have to explain to yourself every single time and tell them, you know what, we actually don't live in trees. It's screwed up.
Yeah, we're not doing badly for ourselves. Like, yeah, we're kind of okay,
And it's good that you are in a diverse student body, right? So you meet a lot of people from across the globe, really. And I think it gives you a platform to experience, these experiences that these individuals share. So when you're writing well, you know what most people experience.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think, one of the things I was proud about was like, someone coming to me and be like, "Yo, we read your article in class. Like our professor like recommended your article. Is like I was reading it in class, and I was like, wow, like this could be something. This is important. You have a voice. You write down some ideas, and you want to be recognized. I think that's all writers, want that to have their work be interacted with, and I think also having a diverse student population, like you said, also helped to just like because there were people whom I would never have those conversations about topics that I wrote about. And so after they reading the article on the Campus Times, coming to me and like, hey, Sakhile, so you think like that, what's going on? Like I wrote an article about having social anxiety, or like having living with an accent. in the US, which is something that Americans will like really point out all the time, that, hey, you have an accent. And so having interactions like that helped, also start deeper conversations and broader conversations about things that we face, not only on campus, but also like off campus.
And it's good that you are utilizing your skill to advocate for something, because most of the times it surprises me the number of individuals I meet who are like exceptionally good writers, but they are always afraid to write. They're always afraid to publish. Some of them will just write and keep it in. So it's good that you can write and share it with the world.
Yeah, thanks. I wouldn't say I'm a great writer, but I think a lot of like writing is just such an interesting experience. It's how I listen to myself think most of the time. That's I wrote a lot more articles that I didn't feel like I wrote more articles than I allowed to publish. Because it's just most of the time it's just like a cathartic process, but you never yeah, it's a decision you have to make of like to publish or not to publish, to put your stuff out there. And it doesn't have to be like a fancy, Campus Times article, but it's just like even like on Medium, right? Like do I, can I stand behind my ideas on a certain thing? Or so it's a very interesting and intricate process of writing. But I think for me, writing was just a way to make sense of the experiences around me, especially around when George Floyd was killed in Rochester, by police, and it was a way to just kind of interrogate a lot of the systems and a lot of the institutional injustices and discriminations that were around, and also put yourself as a Black person in Rochester, who's not distinguishable as an African necessarily. Like people always say, or rather I should say, I say that like as Black people in America, we were just Black. Racism didn't really care that you're from South Africa, didn't really care that you were from the Caribbean. If you're Black, most likely you're going to be subject to the same experiences that most Black people in the US are also subjected to. So it was interesting also, navigating experiences like that. Like there was one time I was driving and I was stopped by the cops, and it was a very uh just a scary moment because you've seen this so many times, and yeah, not great, not a great experience, but it turned out to be not a lethal thing. The police guy was actually pretty nice, but I had to make him understand because I was very he could see the shock on my body when he was talking to me, and he was trying to calm me down, and I was just like, I just wanted the experience to end. It wasn't a time for me to just like start a conversation or whatever. It was just a very interesting experience after all. So we do have those experiences, and there's a lot of people who interrogate their skin. A lot of us, come from countries where we're all like Africans necessarily, specifically, most of us come from countries where there's not a lot of white people, there's not a lot of like racial diversity. So when you go to the US and you start to experience these things, you start asking yourself, oh, did I experience racism, kind of thing. So those experiences, so it was a way for me to like, writing became an avenue, a medium for me to like make sense of all those experiences as a Black person living in the US.
And in a way, it also gives voice to other people who are voiceless, who cannot voice their opinions.
Right.
Keeps the
Like you'll have
conversation going.
absolutely, you'll hear a lot of people come to you and say, hey, I was thinking that. It's just you put words to my thoughts, right? You ascribed, you put the description to what was going on in my mind. And I think that's a kind of a successful thing to do, if you're someone who's interested in writing, to really put intricate thoughts in simple words that people can understand and relate to.
One of your pieces was also about facilitating difficult and tough conversations, and in as much as they're tough and they're difficult, but we still need to have them.
Absolutely, yeah. And so that was the context of that was debate. So I was in BP debate, which is a British parliamentary style debate, in college, and there was a lot of obviously, it's like crossfire arguments. Everyone is like just going, and I thought that there was a healthy aspect about debate that I felt could be replicated across society, in speaking about issues, because one of the things that happen in debate is that you get, in BP debate at least, you get assigned to a side without really, you don't get to choose which side to argue for. You just get put in either opposition or a proposition, and then you have to think, you have to challenge yourself to think as if that is a position that you're truly for or against. And so I think it's a good practice, because you really start to think as if you are someone who really supports that, and you're even surprised at how good the arguments are that you can come up with. So sometimes I felt like if we can take that model and replicate it in a lot of our conversation, they could foster and facilitate a lot of understanding and just kindness among a lot of people.
How does the process of formulating arguments look like?
Yeah, I think putting yourself in someone's shoes is a great way to start. So if, for example, I don't know, let's say like in South Africa, there were protests a few days ago, and let's say, put yourself, like a lot of people are discontented with load shedding, and stuff. And so put yourself in the shoes of the protesters. And if you were a protester, what would be the most important thing you'd be thinking about at the time? And so I think that's a great place to just really, even if you don't understand really, but like put yourself in someone who goes through power shortages like 4 times a day sometimes. Like, what are some of the inconveniences that you would express, and that becomes an important point in an argument. Which is to say, an argument that is about protesting, to say, okay, this is the impetus that is driving a lot of us to protest, because there's a lot that is happening at night when there's no lights. It could be an opportunity for crime to increase, because there's like less surveillance. It's just dark, and people can be targeted, or small businesses would suffer. Losing a day, like for example, losing a day of electricity for a small business is a catastrophic experience. And so yeah, you start from, I think my technique is to start from that. What would someone in this position, if I was this person, what would I think about? And then you just go from there.
Seems like it will be really fascinating to see you debating.
Ha ha ha. No problem.
You do a lot of writing, and they usually say that people can write well, can think well, and you are very articulate too. So combining the way you think, the way you write, and the way you articulate yourself should be hell of an argument.
Yeah, thank you. I think part of why I joined debate really was to improve my speaking and to improve my writing. I think I didn't learn English very traditionally. It was something that even though we were taught English, but I think I came up from a South African public schooling system where a lot of people, like in their senior year of high school, couldn't know how to speak English, and so you really had to like depend on yourself. I think my love for the language really helped me develop wanting to speak it more. Like I loved words from a very young age, and my mom bought me I remember 7th edition Oxford Dictionary, and I was obsessed with it because I would read the word and I would write it down and write its meaning and write its pronunciation. And so, but obviously sometimes I couldn't read pronunciation as it appears in a dictionary. And so, you would read a word and just like pronounce it the wrong way all the time, until someone is like, oh no, that's not how you pronounce that. And then now and then the learning actually happens. But also just watching a lot of like cartoons, I think, helped me. Like I would say words as I heard them. So like in South Africa, with like SABC 123 and ETV, which was like the free channels that we had. And so I used to watch shows like The Young and the Restless, The Bold and the Beautiful, whatever, and repeat words as I heard them. And so so I think that also helped me a lot in terms of just like learning the language. So when I got to college, I realized that like even ALA, right? Like, you meet all these brilliant kids who are just like very articulate and stuff. Writing and rhetoric helped me a lot as well, just like, developing, speaking the language. I think I'm still learning to like speak in more articulate ways, but I think putting myself in incredibly intense environment like debate really helped accelerate the process of like getting closer to mastery of language, I'd say.
Yeah, it should, because you're putting yourself in a tough situation. If you're not articulate, right? You might have a great idea, but since you can't put it in writings or you can't share it with people and speak articulately, then chances are high that you might not be able to convince them, right, to buy into your idea, no matter how good it is, right? So, in as much as you might not be passionate about learning how to speak or learning how to write, you still have to be good at it.
Mm. I agree. I agree. Yeah. And it takes humility to even admit that you're not good at something, right? Like I think if I look at stuff that I wrote like at ALA, for example, and looking back, I literally asked myself what some like about what were some of the educators, what would have been going through their minds when they read some of my stuff or anyone's stuff. Well, let me not speak for anyone, but like I read some of the stuff that I wrote, I'm like, this is awful, like this is just bad. But like I never got that as feedback. What I got as feedback, yeah, keep writing, like writing is an iterative process. And obviously like good teachers will say that. But yeah, I think everything that I've ever written, I told myself that, how can this be better? I don't assume that it's great. And it's not everything that you do, right, that is great anyway. I think this is a writing experience, a universal writing experience, but like it's kind of like writing songs, like I'm in the music industry right now. And so you put out like an artist put out songs that puts out an album, and you just kind of hope that it catches, and then in a few days, like a song comes back with like 1 million streams, and it's like, oh, okay, apparently people like this. So I think it's the same thing about writing. You just kind of write and put it out there in the world, and sometimes it resonates with people and sometimes it doesn't. But your job is to make sure that every sentence that you write is the best sentence that you could have written at that time.
Every sentence that you write is the best sentence you could have written at that time.
So,
And I think if you can't look back at your work and go like, what was I thinking? This is trash, then it shows that you haven't grown really.
absolutely, yeah, yeah, 100%.
So what are you currently doing?
I'm a consultant at Warner Music Africa. I'm based in Johannesburg, and what I do is that I do brands and sync. So these are two sort of departments. A sync has to do with music placement in movies, radios, games, adverts, and stuff. So a client usually would come to us and say, "Hey, I have a movie that I'm doing, or there's an advert or like a campaign that we want to do. We want to song them to it." And my job is to either recommend songs or like look at our catalog across the Warner Music Network, Warner Music Group Network. And so let's say, and then I'll just like appropriately place the song for the client. And if the client uses it, and then we take it from there in terms of processing. And then I also do brands, which is I connect brands with artists. So for example, if maybe Coca-Cola wants to do an ad and they want a musician to do that for them, so I pair them with that. I obviously work with a team, but in very like sort of like off the top, very basic terms, that's what I do.
You majored in politics and minored in history, and now
That's what
you're all music. How did that come to happen?
I'm asking myself the exact same question. Yeah, so I majored in political science and history. And like I said, like I really love what I'm doing right now. And I would have never imagined that I would be doing music. So it's all about, like I said, everything is about, at least in my life, time and chance. I don't know how long am I going to be in here for, but what I do know is that I'm learning as much as I can, and I'm loving it so far. Whatever the future holds, we're going to have to see. But I always like to have just to like an open perspective. But what I really love is that I still get to do the things that I'm passionate about, even in this space, right? For example, one of the things actually that may be relevant to this conversation that I'm doing is that we have a mentorship program that Warner Music Africa is starting called Culture Shifters. And it's basically a program that we're bringing university students from Johannesburg for, recruiting them for a mentorship program. And one of the things that I want the students to do is build lab, because I've done build lab and I think it's great. And so I talked to EL, and I'm talking to the company to say, hey, let's teach these students Build Lab, and let's equip them with entrepreneurial leadership skills because it's important. And so that's how I sort of get to integrate my passions into what I do as well. And it's not just that, right? We work with a lot of artists as well in terms of like finding artists. There's like people I'm talking to, some of which are from ALA, to be like, hey, are you signed? Are you looking for people to work with, and trying to find opportunities for them, if not in the Warner Music Group network, but in other networks as well, just to like make sure that we're opening opportunity for as many students and just people as possible.
So if you're listening right now and you're a musician, I think I've given you someone to contact.
Ha 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 ha.
No, I like the transition, right? Because in a way, it should show university students that it doesn't matter what you're studying for your undergrad, but you could just go out there and really try and see the intersection of things and how you could, do what you love and combine with everything else as how you're doing right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that opportunities are vast. The world is big, and if you can just throw yourself in uncomfortable spaces and do anything that you want to do, and or anything that is available for you. Before this, I worked for a law firm actually in New York City. Just before I came back, I was at a law firm doing mergers and acquisitions in a company, and a little bit before that, I was working for an immigration law firm, filing immigration sort of cases for immigrants, businessmen, and immigrant families. And so there's always opportunities for versatility, especially today, with you can even like get a lot of online jobs. So it's really just being able to throw the net as vast as you can out there, and see what catches, and if you like it, you take it.
And well, thank you for sharing your experience. And at least now, the musicians who are listening to this, they know who they can reach out to. They shouldn't say I didn't tell them about that. But yeah, this has been an amazing conversation, and thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, absolutely. Really great talking to you.